Слухай, що?
Сорі. Ну чого я просто загляну. Сашко, ну ще розчисть, де тобі спати, Сашко? Чи ти не будеш розкидати? Ой, відкривати.
Що?
Диван.
Ні.
Ти так і будеш спати? А ти не грохнешся з нього?
That's a teletype.
Just me. Maybe. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if it's me or not. I don't want to put anybody down. I don't want to force anybody anything. But I shall come here. Well, don't tell me so. This is the last one, actually. taking every step. You know, obedience. I'm not trying to make myself, entertaining. I'm just trying to do what I like to do, and what I like to do is just, there's either, there is time, but it's like, I want to train, I want to work out. So I'm going to do that tomorrow. I don't have to be, I have to learn something, every day. Let me be clear with you. I think that every day you just have to learn something. Like every day brings some, I don't know, a challenge, a test, a trouble, a lesson that you have to learn. And I think for me, the thing that I've been really going through in the past, even I would say the whole, like the past 2-3 years, that I have to learn for myself is consistency and patience. And what I mean with that is just being absolutely focused on to my goal, knowing that things don't happen rapidly. They don't happen within 5 or 10 days, even though they may, and I can make that happen. But I'm not sure that I'm gonna be either happy or satisfied or excited about that as much, only because there are these two directions that I look at. I'm trying to follow other people, right? I'm trying to look at people who made it, technically, and I see like they can do this so fast and so quick, and others are like, some people tell me like you gotta work, like you always gotta work, but like sometimes it happens faster, sometimes it just takes years and years, and like I need patience, and like I need just strength to be able to go on. And I think like in the days like these when I feel down, I don't feel particularly down because of me or because of circumstances. It's like the matter of perspective. Before anything, be thankful. Like before anything happens, just be thankful, because it can be worse. Like things can be much worse in your life, and it's up to you how you're gonna respond to that. Whether you're gonna be negative, whether you're gonna deny that, or whether you're gonna accept it and admit it and just move on with it. You know what I mean? And so that's what I think. I mean, I think that in life you have to just go. Like, you're gonna have bad times, and you're gonna have moments when you feel low and you don't want to do anything, like I feel right now. But I'm like, I got the time, so I might as well do something with that time. That's what I'm about here. Or at least I'm hoping that that's what I'm about. Everything is, and I don't have to show anything. I like that, I have camera lighting coming right at me. Let's go.
And all these other computers, they all have little switches you dial in and punch stuff. And theoretically, you could plug a card in someday to attach a teletype and add some memory. They only came with 256 bytes of memory. So you add some memory and you'll have enough to run a programming language, but you aren't there with just the raw computer kit for $400. And I sat there and I said, that's just what I built 5 years before, called the cream soda computer. I'd been through that stage of switches and lights and so happy that I had a computer, but I wanted something useful like our calculators at Hewlett-Packard. Calculator has a human keyboard. You punch some numbers and things happen. And we have a microprocessor, really. You punch the 5 key and a program executes the right stuff for a 5 key. Causes it to happen. You punch the plus key and the right thing happens for a plus key. That's all it was. So using that model, I said, rather than all these awful switches and all the wires to every switch and lights and all the circuits that have to get those switches and lights connected into the computer itself, and it was so awkward how many parts you'd save if you didn't have the switches and lights, the binary switches and lights. I said, well, why don't I just take my keyboard from my terminal? Just use a keyboard. Matter of fact, I'll just take my terminal with a microprocessor, and now I'll write a little program so you start up and you type on the keyboard to cause the things to happen that you normally do with switches and lights. Let's move to something that looks like a typewriter, because it'll be easier for me to use. I wasn't thinking about the world. I wasn't thinking about selling these. And I designed it, built it, got my program working so that it could do in 250. I only had 256 bytes for a program because you had to put the program in permanent memory. Permanent memory chips, these little proms of the day, the largest that were out were 256 by 4 bits. 2 chips made 256 bytes. So two chips was all I had to work with, and I got it to where you could type in some base 16 numbers into memory, examine memory and to your heart's delight, and tell a program to run some address. So it was still kind of icky and techy, but it was a lot easier to type than it was to use switches and lights. And besides which, if you ever ran a program like BASIC, you'd have to type on a keyboard. So the Apple took that big step of saying a keyboard comes with a small computer. It's a standard part of it. That had never been introduced by anyone else. I'm just amazed. Well, Steve Jobs came along and he saw that there were people around me at the club interested in this new thing. I was showing it off every week. I was passing out schematics. I was going down to people's houses on weekends and helping them solder it together. Okay? I mean, it was everything in the club, the Homebrew Computer Club. Lee Felsenstein would get up to introduce the meetings, and he would always say, the Homebrew Computer Club, which does not exist. And everyone would applaud. Because we didn't want to belong to something that exists, you know, something that's real. And Randy Wigington was a high school kid that I met there. He came on, became one of the early Apple people. His job was to run a little chat system at the local company Call Computer every Tuesday night. Randy would keep it running. Well, I analyzed the BASIC program that it ran under, and what it did was it went to a file called chatx. One person could type at a time. One person would type into this chatx file, and then everybody else would read the chatx file for a while, and then randomly somebody else would get a turn to type. So what I did was I just wrote a program that waited until the chatx file was free, and then dumped 9 pages of Polish jokes into it. So week after week after week, Randy had to explain to the club why all they were getting was Polish jokes, and he didn't know. Funny thing is, while I ran my dial-a-joke, I took some calls live on dial-a-joke, and it was kind of neat because I was like the first chat rooms at AOL. I was anonymous. I was, hey, this is Stanley Zabrzezinski. I'm talking to you. Hello there. I actually met the woman who became my first wife. I didn't think I'd ever get married, but I actually was able to meet people from this way. So that was fun. The Polish American Congress Incorporated threatened me with a lawsuit finally for defaming people of Polish descent and maligning them. And this was in 1974 or something. And I said, what do you mean? They're just jokes. And they said, sorry, we're going to sue you. So I said, what if I change them to Italian jokes? They said, that's fine. That was before political correctness. Now you have to be politically correct is more important than being correct. So anyway, on Dial-a-Joke, I forget. I know I was somewhere along the lines here. So Steve Jobs came along and said, let's sell this computer that you've designed. And, because people were interested in it. And we figured out we'd make a PC board. And Steve said, we'll make it for $20 and sell it for $40. He was used to working in surplus stores. And I thought, with the money we're going to put out, we might put out $1,000 and we'd have to sell 50 computers to get our money back. I don't think we're going to get our money back. And Steve said, yeah, but we'll have the fun of having a company. Well, how could you turn that down when you're young, when you don't need the money anyway? We weren't doing it to make a money. You didn't have to justify being a company. You didn't have to justify it with a profit. So it's connected to your computer, and now you can enter games out of a book in basic programming language. And games are the fun thing in life. Well, I had never programmed in BASIC. But I looked around and I could tell BASIC was the language to go with. And I had my little 6502 computer, and I said, there's no BASIC for it. I'll write the first one, because I do things really fast. I've never had a course in writing computer languages. I had tried to practice on my own techniques to try to find a way to do it, but I'd never taken a course in it, never studied it, I had never done it for myself, for employers, anything. So that was a tough decision to decide to make a BASIC when I'd never even programmed in BASIC. I was a Fortran scientist type, ALGOL, some other languages. So I pulled out a Hewlett-Packard BASIC manual and started copying the grammar charts, the syntax tables, onto paper, deciding what elements I'd keep and what I'd get rid of. And really about the only thing major that I got rid of was floating point numbers. numbers with decimal points, because I had two goals for this language. First of all, I wanted to be the first one to have a language for the 6502. I was real shy, but I'd love to be first at things in life. And to be first, I might save a few weeks if I don't have the floating point in. By the time we did the Apple I, I actually put floating point routines in the ROM. I could write them fine. That was nothing beyond me, but I left them out of this basic because I wanted it to play games and calculate logic solutions for my work at Hewlett-Packard. Two purposes, and you only need integers for that. Okay, I worked on this basic. I put in about 6 months of work. It was like a man years of work, day and night. It was much harder than designing the computer. But I wrote the basic, and it worked great. And every 2 weeks at the Homebrew Computer Club, I'd set up my Sears TV, snaked a cable out of it down to the little Apple I computer board, the little breadboard I had, and keyboard, and I would type for up to 40 minutes in hexadecimal base 16 to enter the code of my basic into the machine. I never once raised my hand in a meeting of the 500 people in our Homebrew Computer Club because I was too shy to ever talk, but I always sat in the back row because there was a power plug there. So I'd type this in, then we'd set up for our demo, and I would run basic and show people you can type this, and you can actually make some text on the screen, and you can type that and do this other things, and it can answer a question. And every week as I added, how could you think of products like the Apple I and the Apple II that we're going to start a company, going to start an industry, having been so open as that, and just shared and shown off, and schematics and listings just passed out to anybody who wanted them. Pretty unusual. So in order to develop good products and start industries, you don't need secrecy. You only need secrecy, I guess, to protect your company from competition. And we didn't have any. The big companies came about. The Homebrew Computer Club was kind of neat. We'd have one session called the mapping session where people would raise their hand with rumors. People would say, I have some parts for sale. Other people would say, I'd like to get some things. Does anyone know how to do this with some kind of computer? And they would sort of spot who was needed what and who would offer what. And then we'd have the random access period. We'd all go into little groups and meet up with the people we wanted to talk to. And that was how the club was organized. Well, we decided to start this company and sell the Apple I, and we had a third partner, Ron Wayne. He was a real arch right-winger. He read books like None Dare Call It Treason, and he had golds in his mattresses and all this stuff. But he had been with a whole bunch of companies, and he'd always been screwed out of the stock options or something. He always got messed up. So we gave him 10% of Apple, and he wrote our legal documents right out of his head on a typewriter. He would type them perfectly with all the legal phrases, and he drew a big, beautiful etching of Newton under the apple tree for our first manual for Apple Computer, the Apple I, and he put the manual together. Well, I got a call at Hewlett-Packard one day. At first I told Steve, I said, hey, I work for Hewlett-Packard. Anything I design, they own first. That's my employee contract. So I really wanted Hewlett-Packard to do this, and I went to the lab manager, and I said, you can build a machine that'll cost about $800, and you unplug it, and you somehow run it up to your TV set on channel 3, and you type BASIC right away. And the lab manager liked it, but he had problems. Like if it's not a Hewlett-Packard TV, and there's a problem, who do you blame? How do you resolve it? And he said that, well, he didn't have the resources available. But for months after that, he kept running into me and saying he hadn't been able to sleep since he heard the idea of an $800 computer that could actually run a programming language. Well, Hewlett-Packard turned it down. So Steve and I went ahead and made our PC board. I sold my Hewlett-Packard calculator to get some money, sold it for $500. But I was an employee. The next month we were going to introduce the HP 67, and it was going to be $370 for an employee. So not a big financial risk. Steve sold a van and got some money, and we paid somebody to lay out a PC board. And we were going to make PC boards for $20 and sell them for $40 and hope we get our money back. I got a call at Hewlett-Packard one day, and Steve said he's sitting down, and I said, yeah, and he said, I just got an order for $50,000. What? That was the biggest financial shock I ever got in all the running of Apple. $50,000, it's like, oh my gosh, this is big money. There was one computer store in our area, and they wanted to buy 100 computers for $500 each, completely built with all the parts. We were just going to sell $40 PC boards, and now we were selling $500 computer boards. Oh my God. Well, that was such a shock. And my supervisor said, you better contact HP's legal department. So I did, and the legal department of Hewlett-Packard spent about a week contacting every division of Hewlett-Packard to make sure they didn't want this kind of product so that I'd be, free to make it outside of HP. Fine. So I kept my job at HP, and we had Apple going. And Steve would get on the phone and call stores and find sales, and we started making the machine. Now, how do you get the money to make it? We had no money, so we had to get the parts. And to get the parts, Steve got credit. He went down to a distributor and arranged that we would get the parts and we could store them in a cabinet where the PC boards were being made. As soon as the PC boards came off the line, the closet got opened up, the parts got opened, and 30 days credit started. 30 days later, we'd have to pay for the parts. The same company that made the PC board would stuff the parts in the PC board and solder it together. So we didn't actually do any manufacturing in a garage or anything. The boards were all made for us. We just drove down and picked them up. And then we'd drive down and pick up some boards. Steve would drive into the garage. We had one workbench in the garage, and I would sit with the oscilloscope and test the boards and find the chips that were pin bent under and shorted traces and fix them. And we'd put the good boards in white boxes, take them down to the dealer. We also arranged for the dealer to get cases and keyboards and transformers, the few extra parts it needed. So the dealer sold the whole thing as a almost built computer. And all the other products at that time were total kits. You had to solder every single pin of every IC yourself. They were just total kits. And this one was the most built, the Apple I. And we had to come up with a price for it. The dealer would pay $500. So it was kind of neat that finally there was a little computer. We looked at all the comparison charts, and our computer was always top of the list because they were in alphabetical order. But we had really best specs, and we had a good little Apple I computer. I started going around to a couple clubs of people and telling them what was on the board, how much they could buy for it, and how they could do this. And there was just an interested type of person around for this kind of computer. But I sat down, I had designed the Apple I with a certain characteristic that I could add color to it by a method that I'd thought of back at Atari. And when I started sitting down to say, let me add the color in now, I'm going to try to add color.